discussion. In this discussion, we are gonna walk through the IEEE 1680 standard. This one is all about how we, as engineers, can make electronics in a way that is better for the environment. So instead of just reading through the rules, we'll try to understand the purpose behind this standard, basically why it exists, what kind of impact it has in our design process, and how it changes the way we should think about our role as the engineers. Now, let's look at why this standard even matters. Right now, the world produces more than 50 million metric tons of electronic waste, and it's happened every year. So that's roughly 5,000 Eiffel Towers worth of junk electronics, and it happened as I said every single year. Now, sustainability isn't just a buzzword anymore. Okay, it's a real design requirement, actually. We need to think not only about the cost and the performance of our design, but also about how our products affect the world. So electronics are everywhere. And the environmental impact has actually gotten just as massive as their role, the electronic device role in our daily lives. That IEEE 1680 basically is more than just a guide. So it pushes the engineers to include environmental thinking directly into the design process. So unlike the standards that just care about safety or performance, this standard looks at the whole life cycle of a product. It covers from the mining the materials all the way to disposing of that product. So that 50 million metric tons of the e-waste, it's not going anywhere unless we make those changes. Of all that waste, remember, only 17.4% right now gets properly collected and recycled. Okay, so what happened to rest? It's gonna be landfills or incinerators or worse than that even, you know? So the studies actually show that about 70 to 80% of the product's environmental footprint is basically locked in during the design phase. So governments and the regulatory agencies are basically stepping up and now enforcing some strict rules. So us as engineers also have to keep up. That means we can't just tag on sustainability at the end. So we need to design it from the start. Working with IEEE 1680 means you're not just solving technical problem, you are taking on the ethical and environmental impact of your design as well. Now, before this standard, there was no actually consistent way to approach the sustainability in electronics. So companies could do whatever they wanted. A lot of so-called like green products were not actually really green. So they just had a good marketing, but all of them lacked actual technical backing. So countries had their own eco labs and the eco labels. So Sweden had the TCO certification, Germany had the Blue Angel, Scandinavia had Nordic Swan, and like in the US we had Green Seal. So all these labels all use different scoring system. So basically, it was nearly impossible to compare two products internationally. Like big name a manufacturer like HP or Apple or Dell or Lenovo, they created their own in-house standards. So that helped them, but created a chaos for the suppliers. So smaller manufacturer basically had to jump through multiple hoops to meet every big company's different expectations. At the same time, we were seeing a growing, basically mountain of discrete electronics piling up in the landfills. So many of these electronics contain some hazardous substance like mercury or cadmium or lead, uh, which basically were leaching into the soil and water. So without a unified, basically, approach for the sustainability, all the efforts were disconnected and often fell short actually of having like a real environmental impact. Now, then IEEE 1680 was introduced. This standard is all about the measuring and improving the environmental impact of the electronics across their entire lifespan. So it's not just one a part of the design. From the design, from the mining, even the material that you use to build that electronic device, all the way through the design, through the testing, through the customer use, normal operation, maintenance, repair, and at the end of their lifespan, the recycling of or disposing of the electronic device is all included in this standard. Okay, so basically it lays out some material rules like banning hazardous substances and aligning basically with some global chemical laws like ROS or REACH. Now, it also encourages the designer to think about how easy it is to repair or upgrade or even recycle the device. Basically, once it is in the hands of the users. Okay. So it looks at how much power, also, it looks at how much power a device uses while running in operational normal condition, or it's in a sleeping mode or idling mode, and basically pushes those design for energy efficiency. Now that's not it, just like these kind of like technical aspect. Even the packaging is part of this scope. Okay, so the manufacturer should use some recycled materials and avoid some hard to recycle like plastics like PVC or foam. Okay, so and we don't stop in those steps. It also includes the corporate ethics. Okay, so things like how companies report environmental metrics and whether their supply chain respect like the labor rights. So, but it does not also that it does not cover electrical safety. This standard does not cover the electromagnetic interference or mechanical performance testing. So basically, this IEEE 1680 is there to evaluate the product sustainability. Okay, it's not a technical performance or a physical safety standard. Now, as we mentioned, there are several aspects of our design and implementation of those design that would not fall into the scope of IEEE 1680. Like electrical safety is completely outside of this standard scope. Now, if you want to know if something will shock you or catch fire, basically the safety of your design, you need to look to like UL or IEC standard. Okay. This standard doesn't cover how a device manages the electromagnetic interferences. Now, that's the job for CISPR standard or FCC. Okay. It This standard doesn't test whether a device can handle like mechanical shock, like drops or shakes or extreme temperature. Now, there are several specific like military or industrial standards for each specific technology or device. Those standards would handle these aspects. Now, again, this standard doesn't tell you how well the parts work. Okay, from the like electrical standpoint, you need to use the specific standard, the specific performance testing standard and validation for your design. There are several standards actually from the several regulatories and agencies that covers those aspects. Now, IEEE 1680 basically works alongside these other standards. Its job just to make sure we're designing products that are environmentally responsible. So there is no technical aspects or technical validation in this standard. Now, IEEE 1680 is not just about whether a product is sustainable or not. It actually gives the products different level of certification. We have the bronze level, the silver level, and the gold level. These levels actually help the manufacturers and also the buyers to understand how environmentally responsible a product really is. Like bronze is the setting line, is the starting line. So this is the bare minimum that every single electronic equipment should meet those criteria of the bronze certification. So this is a required criteria, and there is no exception for any electronic device on any requirement within the bronze certification. Now we have silver, which means the product meets all those required criteria that we had in bronze certification, but it goes beyond and it also earns at least 50% of some available optional point. Basically, it's doing some that the manufacturer and the designer doing some extra work on the sustainability. Now, goals go beside that. So the products have to go basically above and beyond. So they're meeting all the required items, okay? And like the required item in the bronze, and they meet 70%, 75% or more of the optional points. So those required criteria are the must-haves. So you can skip these if you want certification at any level. Okay. The optional criteria are where manufacturer can like basically show off by doing more. This gives them like extra points toward a higher rating. Now there is a balance between the required and optional. So it makes sure that the companies do not just excel in one area and ignore the rest. So each product category, also like desktops, laptops, monitors, or printers, they all have their own customized scoring system. That way, basically, it says that what is count as a strong sustainability efforts depends on the type of the product that is being rated. This basically tiered system encourages the progress. Even if a product started with a bronze certification, now manufacturers can basically aim to improve their design or the implementation, the production, so it go beyond the bronze to the silver or the gold certification next time. Okay, so now we talked about that the IEEE 1680 basically covers the lifespan of the product. So basically what we meant is IEEE 6080 takes what's called a life cycle boundary or a life cycle approach. That means it looks at everything the product goes through. So from the birth to the retirement. And it checks the environmental impact at each stage. So first, you've got the upstream supply chain, which is the raw material extraction or component manufacturing and assembly. This is where the material, like metals or plastics or chemicals, basically are sourced and processed. After that comes the use phase. So this is all about how the product performs once it is in hand of the customer, or like the energy consumption of that device or the emissions produced by that device, and whether it can be upgraded instead of the replaced or not. Then there is some maintenance and support aspect. So we need to answer that, can the product be repaired easily, or are the firmware updates are available, or like the spare parts, are the spare parts accessible? Okay, these are important aspects of the maintenance and support. Now, finally, in the last part, there is an end of life management. So does the manufacturer actually offer a take back program, or can the product be recycled or safely dismantled? So these are important when we talk about the sustainability of our design and manufacturing. Now, IEEE 1680 basically encourages the manufacturer so they could calculate the carbon footprint also, or like energy payback time and the toxicity adjusted mass for each stage. This helps the manufacturer to design basically smarter and better, and not just for today, but for the entire lifespan of the product, as we said. Now, IEEE, as we said, IEEE 1680 has two types of criteria. One is the required criteria, the other one is the optional criteria. Okay, so we need to understand the difference, and that's the key to understand how the scoring system works within this standard. Now, the required criteria, as we mentioned before, they are not negotiable. If a product misses even one of these requirements, it's not going to get certified. Now, optional criteria basically give the manufacturer the ability to go beyond and show off a little. Okay, so these are some extra sustainability basically features that could earn points and push the product toward like silver, gold certification. Now, optional points usually range from 1 to 5, depending on the environmental impact. So the more meaningful the improvement is, the more points it's worth. All the optional points the product earns are added up to calculate its total sustainability score. Now, when I say the optional points range from 1 to 5, this is each individual requirement. Now, all those requirements will be categorized in several categories. We are going to talk about those categories in future slides. But each requirement, each specific requirements worth 1 to 5 points, and each category also have a cap. That is because we wanted to make sure that if we are going through the optional points, we don't focus on one aspect. We focus on all the aspects all together. Okay, there is a very good broad improvement. Now, all those optional points that the product earns, they are added up to calculate the total sustainability score. So the bronze, which means all the required points, the optional is 0. When we talk about the silver, we said all the required plus 50% of optional. And the gold, as we mentioned, is the required criteria plus 70% or more of the optional. Now, this is basically encourages a well-rounded improvement. So you cannot just focus on one thing like packaging or ignore everything else. Now, let's talk about how those single criteria are categorized. So that IEEE 1680 is very organized. So every criteria basically is broken down in a way that tells you exactly what is expected or how it's measured and what proof you need to get the certification. Now, first category is the title and the reference code. So each item has a name and a reference code. So, like the first characteristics is all those requirements should be distinguished from each other so you can find it quickly within the standard. Now, there is an applicability note in those requirements which explains how or like in which devices those requirements are applied to. For example, some criteria might only apply to printers or laptops, not other equipment. There is also a measurement methodology in all those requirements that tells you how to verify those claims you make regarding that aspect. So, like what kind of testing or documentation you need. And there is always a threshold. So this is the exact number you need to hit, like having like more than a 30% post-consumer recycled content. Okay, so these are like an example of those aspects. Now, we also need the evidences that includes things like a third-party test result or the data sheets or certifications or the design schematic. Now, if it's an optional criteria, okay, that criteria also tell you how many points it worth. Okay, we also have some audit frequency that is listed on those criteria. So some things are checked once, but there are some requirements that you have to check every year or when something changes. Okay, so this structure actually makes the standard predictable and transparent and fair. So manufacturers know exactly what to do, and also the auditors know exactly what to look for. Now, those optional points in IEEE 1680 are not just some scattered points all over the standard. They are grouped into categories based on what part of the product or the company they affect. So we have some requirements that are categorized in materials and substances. The maximum point that you can get in this category is 20 points. Okay, so there are several requirements. Each has 1 to 5 points. But within that category, you can go up to 20 points. Okay, there is a cap. So this includes like using safer materials or reducing the toxins and like upping the recycled content. So these are all falling into this like category. Next category is the energy efficiency. The maximum point you can get is 20 points. And the points here come from like reducing the power usage during the normal operation or standby or sleep modes. Okay. We have end of life design category, which the maximum point, the cap is 15 points. And this basically rewards the products that are easier to disassemble or repair or recycle. The packaging category has the cap of 10 points. So the maximum points is 10. And the products earn points in this category for using like recycled packaging and avoid to use the thing like plastic foam, okay, which is hard to recycle. We have corporate responsibility category. The maximum points in this category is 15. And this category looks at the environmental reporting or labor conditions and responsible sourcing in the supply chain. Now, last category is the innovation and the bonuses. This category can earn maximum 10 points, and it's talk about if a manufacturer could come up with something totally new and effective for sustainability. This is like research and innovation kind of like aspect of improving the sustainability. Now, these caps basically that we mentioned keeps the scoring balanced. So it's not like a manufacturer could focus on a single category and that category can dominate the whole kind of like bonus points and the optional criteria. So you have to do well basically in multiple areas if you want to get gold certification. Now, the setup encourages the manufacturers basically to think about the whole picture. So it's not just make one flashy change and call it a day. Now, let's walk through how the product actually gets certified under the IEEE 1680. And it's not just a checklist, it's a whole process. Okay. At the first step, the manufacturer does a self assessment. This usually means like their internal sustainability or compliances team, which is normally within the quality control part of the manufacturer. Those team reviews the product and basically checks how well it lines up with those criteria defined within the IEEE 1680. So they gather all the documentation like test result or like a design specs or supplier declarations. So they could back up their claims of how good their product is respect to environmental effect. Now, after that, we have external review. So some independent third-party groups that are called conformity assessment bodies, okay, they come in to do some like a full audit. Now, these audits are very true. So they include materials verification, emission testing, teardown inspections, and some corporate policy reviews. So it goes to all the details when it comes to having like external review. And once the audit is passed, now all supporting documents like test reports or certificates or a score calculation are all submitted to an EPEAT registry. Okay, EPEAT registry. Now, that EPEAT is a public, like online database, which on that database, all the certified products are listed, and basically anyone can look them by the brand or category or certification level. So the product is officially registered as like a bronze or silver or gold, depending on the source and the score. Now, that's not the end of it, actually. We have some post-certification surveillances. So there are some random audits or spot checks and even compliance-driven reevaluations. Okay, so the whole process ensures like accountability, and it helps the consumers to trust that the certified product truly actually meet the environmental claims that it makes. Now, this when we talk about the material composition and restricted substance, this IEEE 1680 has some like firm rules basically when we talk about the materials, specifically when we talk about the hazardous one. If you don't meet these, you can basically forget about the certification. These are some strict limits, like on toxic substance like lead or mercury or cadmium. Uh, so these limits usually follows RoHS guidelines, RoHS, which are required by law in many countries. And if a product like use beryllium, say in ceramics or alloy, the manufacturer has to declare it and show there are safety protocols for workers that are met. So the to prove the compliances, manufacturers basically submit some material safety data sheet or X-ray fluorescence reports and supply some chain declarations using like format defined in standard IEC 62474. Now, these restrictions are basically mandatory. They are not optional. So you can't even get a bronze certification without checking these boxes. So controlling hazardous substances, that won't protect workers or users or recyclers and environment. So it's basically a win across the board. Now, as we mentioned, IEEE 1680 also includes some energy performance criteria. They are not just suggestions, okay? They are part of the required checklist. First, the product have to meet the Energy Star standards, okay? That's the baseline. For power supplies that are rated at 75 watts or more, they also must be at least 85% efficient at 20%, 50%, and 100% of the rated load. So they are going to be tested on those conditions, and the efficiency of those power supplies should exceed 80, be equal or more of 85% efficiency. Now, we also have the power factor aspect, which shows how efficiently electricity is used. And it always should be at least 0.9 at the full load condition. Now, when we have a sleep mode, which should kick in automatically within 30 minutes of inactivity, okay? So the power use should be under 2 watts for like a desktop devices and like 1 watt for laptops. We also have like off mode, or when the device is fully turned off. And during that, the maximum power that the device can consume in off mode is 0.5 watts. Okay. So these numbers have to be measured basically using a standard procedure like those in IEC 62 301. And the idea is simple. The less power your product base, the better it is for the environment and for your customers like utility bill. These requirements are part of the mandatory criteria, which means a product can't even be considered as a certified product without meeting those criteria. Now, IEEE 1680 also cares a lot about what happened after the product leaves the store. So basically the answer is to, can you repair it? Can you recycle it? And that's actually what this section is all about. So the key parts like battery or RAM and storages in our electronic device, they all should be accessible without needing a special tool. So this basically makes the repair very quick and easy. There are cooling components in our device like fans and filters. They also need to be accessible for cleaning or replacement. Now, all the plastic parts that we used, and they are over 25 grams, they all must be labeled clearly based on the specific standard ISO 11469. This helps the recyclers sort the plastic properly. Batteries need to be removable using like basic tools, so not soldered or glued, okay? And if you use actually the glues or adhesive that are permanently bound components, this is actually discouraged, okay? And basically, actually, you are not allowed to use those glues at adhesive, okay? So they are fully prohibited. Now, if we have molded in metal inserts, they are only allowed if they don't interfere with the recycling process. Now, co-molded materials like plastic fused with the metals, they are limited since they are very hard to separate and recycle. So the whole point here is to make the product last longer and make end-of-life recycling a real option. So this design approach basically supports circular economy goals like reuse, repair, and recycle. Basically, it's rather than like landfill disposal. Now, let's talk about where companies can go above the basics. These are the optional criteria. They aren't required, as we said, but they are where innovation and leadership in sustainability really show itself. So when we talk about the material and substances, as we said, category can earn 25 points. This includes things like using a higher percentage of the recycled content or avoiding the harmful substances. In energy efficiency, we aim to have a product that is performed even better than the Energy Star requirement. Now, remember, Energy Star is the base required, so it's not optional. If you go beyond Energy Star, now you get the optional bonus and the optional points. So in the design for longevity and upgradability, we mean using modular design. So we offer long-term like support and making upgrades easy for users. We mentioned the packaging category. This basically encourages using like less packaging or recycled material and smarter logistics. Corporate performance looks at how well a company manages its environmental performance, like including like a transparency or some ethical sourcing and fair labor practices. And as we said, there are innovation bonuses that this is for companies doing something truly new, okay, that isn't already covered in the standard, but clearly helps the sustainability. Now, these categories let actually the manufacturer show their leadership in ways basically that make sense for their product and the businesses. As we mentioned, the point is distributed across categories to push companies to like improve across the board and do not just focus on one area. And the product that maxes out in just like energy or packaging, they would not hit gold certification unless it also makes a meaningful improvement in like other areas. Now, we mentioned earlier briefly, IEEE 1680 does not exist in like a bubble and with itself. This standard is designed to work with other major environmental and safety standards. Okay, that way companies can meet multiple basically requirements without duplicating like the work that they have to do. So this standard, for example, is closely aligned with RoHS standard, which is the European standard. The RoHS is short for restriction of hazardous substance. Okay. Uh, if a product already meets the RoHS, it's well on its way to meeting the IEEE 1680's material criteria. So if you have the RoHS certification, you already checked the boxes for the material criteria in IEEE 1680. Okay. Now, this standard also supports the REACH, which is another EU regulation. That one focus on chemical safety and like disclosure. And IEEE 6080 actually encourages similar material transparency. Now, when we talk about the Energy Star, as we mentioned earlier, the IEEE 1680 with reference to the Energy Star benchmarks. So if your product is Energy Star certified, okay, that checks off a big chunk of the energy requirement. Okay, now we have also some environmental management system defined in ISO 14001, and it's an international framework for environmental management system, and it basically aligns very well with the corporate responsibility expectations that exist in IEEE 16.8. Now, for declaring the material content, IEEE 1680 works with the standard IEC 62474. Okay, this is the international standard for reporting the materials in a consistent and like a trackable way. And if we have some ethical sourcing of mineral in our aspect of the 1680, there is a OECD due diligence guideline, which actually IEEE 1680 aligns with this by requiring companies to address the responsible supply chain practices. So basically, by working with these major global standards, okay, this IEEE 1680 that we talk about helps to reduce the audit work for companies and supports international product distribution. Now, this standard also encourages the companies to take like a system thinking approach. So look at the big picture of the product design or supply chain or energy or waste and ethical all together. So in summary, IEEE 1680 actually helps the companies, okay, to build sustainability into their product. And it does that in a way that makes global compliances very simple and more strategic. Now, this is our discussion for today. If you have any question, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you for your attention.